Hi everyone, it's been a while, and I am here back with Ranjay Gulati from Harvard Business School. And he's an author of many books, like I think 7 of them, if I'm not wrong. But I think the last one is my favorite, Deep Purpose. And he's also doing a lot of podcasts with amazing purpose-driven organizational leaders. So there's a lot to talk about. So welcome, Ranjay. Thanks for saying yes to being there with me and my audience.
Thank you, Brooke. My pleasure to be here with you today.
Yes, of course. So I know you after the book, and I'm sure before the book. Unfortunately, I didn't know you before the book, but after the book, I see all the attention that you're getting. And I think we are in a time where there is a lot of conversations about purpose. But you and I think being in this for a while, we know that it's not always means the same thing to everyone. So before we go into that, I would love to hear everybody that I have on this series. I'm always curious, how did your attraction to purpose came about? Why did you get interested in the first place? Let's start with that.
Well, I think it was a confluence. It wasn't one key moment. It was a confluence of circumstances. I was teaching in the advanced management program. My students were pushing me hard, saying, we need to talk about purpose. I didn't know what they were asking. I thought they were asking for CSR, but they were wanting more, something bigger. So I realized there was something else there. There was my own conversation with Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, who was writing these letters to public company CEOs that they should have a purpose. So that was also on my mind that, here is a leader of a large financial institution who's talking about purpose, not stakeholder capitalism and environment, just purpose more broadly. And it was my own introspection and looking at companies and myself. I found that, I was, I deeply connected with the purpose of my own employer, Harvard Business School, which was we educate leaders who make a difference in the world. And I felt that I was different. So all these things made me realize that there was something else that one needs to understand about how organizations unlock growth. And so it was me coming to my own realization that, maybe we have forgotten something about the meaning of work and how all of us think about what we may consider even work. And so that was it was a coming together of coming to mind. And I was going on a sabbatical. So I was thinking, what am I going to do? And so I actively started to explore what are some ideas that haven't been fully explored before.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And as you explore and went deeper and deeper into this topic, did you find things that you didn't think before, or was it surprising as you do the research of who is doing it and for what reasons? Were there some aha moments for you too as you did the research?
Look, there were many aha moments. There was, in fact, even my own life aha moments. I realized that as a kid, when my mother told me that, I hope you never have to work a day in your life, I never understood what she was really saying. Till I realized this whole idea that, work is a job, and we say work-life balance. That is a very horrible phrase. Work is part of life. And so how do we think about that? It made me realize that how, when she started her business, it was around starting a financially sound business for herself. But it was also around understanding that how can I bring these ideas to the Western world? I want to show Western world that Indians were not primitive, backward people. There was an idea around pride, national pride, or cultural pride, I would say. But there was also this idea that I want to help these women in villages. If I start this business, then I can employ them or help them start their business to make the fabric for my designs. So it was a combination of things. And you realize that, leaders who come at things with a sense of purpose, they come to it differently. And even people who work in those businesses show up differently. And those businesses have an easier time convincing their customers, and they have an easier time forming partnerships. It's just unlocking value when you have clarity of purpose. And I also want to say purpose has a self component to it. Mm-hmm. It's not about, I'm only here to save the planet. My mother was starting a business to have a livelihood. But you can also have what is called a pro-social component to it, or what you might call a noble component to it, that I want to do something more than just make money. And I have a big idea. So how do we think about, and how do I reconcile this? I want to make money and I want to deliver value for my shareholders but I also believe that businesses have a larger responsibility and duty.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. There's so much in there that I want to explore a little bit more. First of all, what a wise mom you had. I love that. And I think I heard it in one of your interviews with somebody else, but like, I don't want you to work a day in your life. And some people feel like, oh, that's totally something different, because people have lost the notion that you can work and love it. And it doesn't always have to be out the money that you make, but you enjoy doing it so much. But I think over time, at the beginning of the industrial age, especially, we like you said, I hate work-life balance too, because we separated so much, because we hate our work. We want to retire the next day because we just don't like what we do, and it's only for the money. And I agree with you completely. Like, people show up differently when they have a find meaning at work. So love all of that. But like,
you can see in COVID, that's what's happened, right? In COVID, what are we seeing? The whole what people are calling the great resignation, I'm calling the great rethink.
Yes. Yeah. I saw your article in Boston Globe, saying great rethink. It's so true, because now all of a sudden people started feeling like, okay, what matters to me the most, right? It's so much related to the why question. Why do I work? And what is work doing for me? And they were able to spend some time with the loved ones. So yeah, very true, very true. So coming back to Larry Fink, I remember myself in 2019 when he wrote the letter. I was so excited that he wrote that, and he expected that from people and companies that they work with. What do you think happened since then? Do you think people who took it on are doing it and doing it in the right way? Or people or some organizations are doing purpose washing? How do you see, since you wrote those letters, what's happening to those companies?
I think the word has been hijacked. That's the sad part. It's been politicized and hijacked. The right wing calls it woke capitalism, woking, that purpose is basically saying businesses can ignore shareholders and focus on stakeholders, except for shareholders. That is never the case. That is a misconstrual and a twisting of what I think is the original intention, even by Larry. On the left wing, you have people saying purpose of business is anything but profit. Anything but profit. And you're like, how can that be true? And I think so we have to understand that, businesses have to, and I think there's also a time horizon confusion, that, are businesses there for only short run or long run or both? Mm-hmm. So, we have this kind of mischaracterization of purpose as one. Purpose confusion is what I would call it. And the other one is we have the purpose washers, mm-hmm. who basically have also turned this into yet another one of those fads of pretend goody, or pretend to be a goody person, virtue signaling, as we will call it, or some other call it virtuous side hustles.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Yeah, that's what I've been dealing, especially being in this work for 20 years and seeing how excited I get that the Larry Finks of this world is talking about it, but now seeing so much purpose washing happening, I spend most of my time telling what it is not versus what it is, because it's just happening in so many places. Do you have any idea, now that you're so much into this and have a lot of conversations about purpose, talking to your students even, how we can prevent more purpose washing happening? I know it's a big loaded question, but
no, I think it's a fair question. I think it's a good question also. I think is that, the issue is deep down, people are not convinced. They don't know what purpose is really. Or they think of purpose as a purpose statement. So it's like a mission PR exercise. So just put it out there. And the third is they don't even genuinely believe that it's good for performance. Is it really good for business? Is purpose good for business? Mm-hmm. And I think that is not clear to people. And I think and I think purpose and performance have to go together. And people if it's not, then you're like, okay, it's a tax on business. Then I should just do the minimum I need to do so I can pretend I'm goody. But I think if you recognize that purpose is good for business, and that was what my book and also these podcast interviews I've done with 10 CEOs from around the world, in each of them, I asked them the question, is purpose good for business? Or is it just a tax? And you will be amazed at the answers I heard. You know, the CEO of Careem, the largest rideshare company in the Middle East, said, purpose is our superpower. David Velez, the CEO and founder of Nubank, the largest digital bank in the world, said, without purpose, we wouldn't be where we are. Or, you know, Ross Brewer, the CEO of Walgreens, Boots Alliance, said, you know, purpose was hugely important to how she operates as a leader in unlocking value. Alan Job said, you know, if you look at our brands, the purpose brands are growing faster than the non-purpose brands. So, of course, I don't have the statistical data because it's hard to index company purpose and correlate it to performance. There's all kinds of noise around how do you measure purpose. But, you know, something to think about. So I think there is this kind of skepticism born out of, that we don't know what exactly is it driving value or not, et cetera, et cetera. So I think this is the real issue that I think that arises. And I think part of our job should be to dispel this confusion.
Yeah, very true, very true. And I know how much time you spend on this. And people like me who have been in the trenches for so long are so appreciating what you do, because I feel like it's still the awareness. The purpose awareness was not there long time ago. Now that it's there, it's still creating more awareness of what it is and what it does for business. And like all the great examples that you gave, they know, and you can't always measure it. And I'm not a person coming from the corporate world that feels like we have to measure everything, but I know we have to in some ways, but there's different dimensions to measure. Very true. So talking to like 10 CEOs so far, and I know you have some more lined up, what do you see the common denominator is between those organizations or those leaders which made this happen and which made it so successful?
I think they first understand that purpose is not a purpose statement. It's more than that, right? It's deeper than that. So if you're really going to take purpose seriously, you're going to go really deep with it. You're going to really allow yourself to understand that purpose is a fundamental way of being. It gets you to think long-term and short-term. It gets you to imagine your place in the world. And the moment you start thinking that way, you naturally have to think about different stakeholders, because when you're a long-term business, you have to think about customers and employees also. And you have to think about the communities where you operate, because they're all necessary for long-term success. Okay, short-term, you ignore all of them. So at the minimum, you need to think about customers and employees and communities where you operate. Fine, planet is a long-term play for you, maybe. But even that is becoming a short-term play. So to what degree are you able to articulate for yourself your reason for existence? And so that's the first piece of it. Then the question is, this has to inform everything we do. Not just a PR exercise. It has to inform our strategy, our hiring, our promoting, our own benchmarking of ourselves, how we think about ourselves. And from there, you get to the next piece of the puzzle, which is, okay, what are the benefits and are we putting our purpose to work? But if it's a PR exercise, self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
Purpose is a mission statement. Good luck.
Yeah. Yeah. So the common denominator that you see in all of them is like they understand exactly what you call in your book, and the book's name is Deep Purpose. And I love what you say that. I used to say deep purpose versus surface. You call it deep versus convenient, which is even better. And I started borrowing those words from you. So they understand that it is so much more than a PR marketing exercise, and it is so much deeper. Is there anything else that you see as a common denominator in all of those good purpose-driven companies?
I think another piece of the puzzle is they drive purpose to the individual. They really drive purpose to the individual. You know what I mean? It's personal. It has to be personal. It has to just It has to be personal. It has to be tangible. It has to be authentic. And employees have to buy into it. And in today's world, if you fake it, they're going to call you out on it. It'll backfire on you, right? You saw that with Spotify and Joe Rogan. We have a purpose, but really this is not a, employees are going to Facebook, you can see you try to play the game, that's going to backfire on you. They understand that employees care, but you got to make it real and personal for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have to palpably believe that I'm working in a deep purpose company. Your customers have to buy into it, that you really are that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your other ecosystem partners have to believe it. So how do you make it real, authentic? You can't fake it. And I think that's really hard. I think the hardest one is the employee one. How do you take a frontline worker? Because whatever little data we have shows that there's an exponential decay in purpose. Meaning, as you go down the hierarchy of a company. Senior leaders, they drink the Kool-Aid. They're like, yeah, we are a purpose company. As you go down the chain of command, it disappears. So just wanted to flag that for you to keep in mind. That, it's a wonderful tagline, but it's got to be real.
Yeah. And that's why, like, when I put a list of purposeful companies, I watch them for a long time. Not only when they come up with the purpose statement, because then you want to see, to build the trust, they have to perform and see that it is real, right? And I think consumers and employees do the same. It's great that you're doing all this transformation around purpose, but let's see, we'll watch you, right? In order to gain their trust, you have to wait a little, for sure. And what do you say about this? This is definitely some of the common denominators that I've seen, but I also feel like, and I wonder what you think about it, unless the top people, especially the CEO or the founder, understands it deeply and is very committed, I haven't seen one example where a company gets to be purposeful in the long run. What do you think about the role of the top people, really the very top, the CEOs and the founders?
Well, these 10 leaders, I interviewed a bunch for my book, right? So I had 18 companies. I interviewed all 18 CEOs, but then I interviewed these 10 also in great detail now that my book was done. And I'll tell you, everyone talks about purpose in very personal terms. It's a company purpose, but it has to connect to their own sense of purpose. Like, why is it important to me? I mean, Ross Brewer saying that, look, I joined this company as a healthcare because I had to take care of my aging parents. And I found that even with all the resources in the world, it was a challenge. Healthcare is a mess. And, and even for people who have the resources to do it. So she said, I wanted to find a way to change the way healthcare happens. Or if you look at some of the founders, just like my mother, the Careem founders started Careem because they saw it as a way to unlock mobility for women in the Middle East. In many countries, they're not allowed to go with a stranger driver. So they were always reliant on a male household family member. And so idea was, with Careem, we can create a trusting environment where the family is willing to let her go in a Careem vehicle. It was also to create opportunity for the workers, the drivers, who are thoroughly exploited in conventional taxi companies. So to give them decent fair wage, to help customers and help employees. So look at that. So their purpose was around unlocking value, of course. And by the way, they sold the company for a couple of $1 billion. So, and they're still there.
Yeah.
So, they don't have to work there, but they choose to work there. So, you ask yourself, there's something different. And I think a lot of us miss it. And I think a lot of leaders need to introspect. Why am I here? What is my own purpose? And if you look at Hubert Joly, who's my colleague now and former CEO of Best Buy, he talks about how, for him, before he could talk about company purpose, he had to think about his own purpose. And that allowed him to transform Best Buy. So I think just something to think about. I think all of us need to do a little more
Yes.
introspection,
Yes.
because purpose is fundamentally an individual construct. Remember, the idea of purpose is thousands of years old. It's
Yeah,
fundamentally about how we
definitely.
see ourselves in the world. And then we can extrapolate this idea to organizations.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, beautiful. So great examples too. And I love Hubert Joly too and his story. And it's very individual. And I think I like it was in the Boston Globe that you said the magic is in the middle. And I saw that myself through my own work, that if your individual purpose is aligned with what you do with your organization, that's exactly where all the synergy, the engagement, motivation, everything happens in that little point. And thank God now we have a lot of research that shows that too. And McKinsey's one of his reports show that it is really the most beautiful place to be. So I totally get what you're saying. If the leader understands his or her purpose in the company, it makes a huge difference. And I always ask this too, from all the research that you've done and all the people that you talk to, have you seen any company that has done great in terms of being totally authentic, purpose-driven company without the leader's commitment at the top? I haven't seen one, so I'm still wondering, because that's why I say it's one of the common denominators. Why? Because when I talk to the public and lots of big crowds, they always say, we understand what you're saying, but our CEO doesn't. What do we need to do? Do you have any answers to that? Because, and I don't have a good answer, because I keep telling like, yeah, I haven't seen any good example when the top person doesn't believe and understands this value that purpose brings. Do you have answered to my audience who asked that question?
No, I think it's very hard. I think the leader sets the tone for it, but I think a leader alone can't do it either. So I've seen companies where the leader is deeply purpose driven, but nobody else in the organization is, because they have
Why
not
do
been
you
able
think? Yeah.
to, they have not been able to transmit their own purpose orientation into the organization, or worse, they leave and all the purpose goes out the door with them, because it was so deeply embedded in their persona and existence. And I talk about that in my book, about kind of the personification paradox is what I call it, that, we personify purpose in an individual. And so when they walk out the door, purpose walks out with them.
So that's a great point, though. So what do you think, out of everything that you have seen and heard and experienced, what can a CEO who really deeply believes in purpose and probably was able to put that and trickle down the whole company, was very successful with the financial results too, so that it stays when they retire or when they leave? What can they do you think?
So remember, people identify, any employee identifies, it's easier to identify with a person than an idea, right? It's just easier, or even if it's an idea, but you look at it through the person. Oh, I really admire my founder because he or she is like that. It's not like I admire my company because the company has this culture. And I think part of the leader's job is to manage succession well. So they find somebody who personifies those same qualities and they can showcase that. So the handoff shows, here, this person is coming in, and by the way, they exemplify our purpose in a way that nobody else does. So making that part of the conversation. The other piece of it is that, you have to make sure that people's loyalty is, it's really easy to become narcissistic in this regard. When you're a larger than life leader, you start to kind of take yourself too seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And how to stay grounded is a very difficult challenge. And I think part of it is to direct people to the principles behind purpose rather than themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So you shouldn't be the only custodian and carrier of purpose. It should be amplified by others in the organization, so it's not tied to your brand. I think leaders like to become larger than life, and they have a little branding exercise around their own existence. And then when they leave, it creates a problem for the next person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think this is something we have to all understand that.
Yeah, true. Very good point. Yeah. I think just to make sure that it's part of the culture, it's not part of only the CEO who brought this on, will make a big difference in the long run. Because I'm afraid, even like I see and I work with some of the startups too, and startups are so much into their why because it's so fresh and new, and they know this is what they love to do. They can find their why so much more easier than big traditional companies can do. But then over time, when they get to be successful, somebody buys them out and it's totally gone. So that's what I keep on happening and seeing too. Do you have any examples of that, or are you seeing the same? How can we prevent that why to be, so that it doesn't get lost when
Well,
somebody else, the big companies, buy them?
so look, some of it is inevitable, right?
Yeah.
It's not easy to, but just say one thing to you. If you're acquiring another company, if you are the acquirer, we always talk about cultural fit as being key. We say any company, always look for cultural fit when you buy a company. I think when you buy a company, look for purpose fit also. So I think
Mm-hmm.
for the acquiring company, my advice is, and then when you're merging the companies, depending on how independent you want to leave them or not, if you want to merge them into you need to find a way to reconcile their existing purpose with your purpose. So just like you're looking for cultural integration, which we talk a lot about in post-merger integration, the cultural integration is like numero uno, first thing. I think we have to think about kind of purpose integration and what you might call the principles that come out of those purpose statements. So, like, look, we understand how you have been. I'll give you an example of one that I wrote a case on is Livongo. Livongo was a startup that grew really fast and was very successful in serving people with diabetes. And they gave you a device that was connected to your mobile phone. It would send you messages. It would have a phone operator come on if it was an urgent emergency, and it would give you real-time data on your phone. And it was 40% of people who worked there had someone in their family who had diabetes, either them or somebody else. It was very focused on people with diabetes. And then they got acquired / merged with Teladoc. And I think part of the problem was that, that I don't know, I'm not privy to what happened after the merger, but I think Teladoc could have done a much better job thinking about what this unique culture of this organization was and what their purpose was. They were very mission driven.
Mm-hmm.
And I think is you kind of just assume, okay, you're us now your mission has changed. And people left. All the senior leaders left, first of all, but I'm sure others left too.
Yeah.
So what you need to be careful about is when you acquire a purpose / mission driven company, people really are bought into it. And if you take it away from them, they're likely to leave.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
So,
there's still a rare commodity, unfortunately. Because I work with individuals who want to find more meaning at work, also with organizations, I get to see both ends of it. What I see over and over again is that a lot of people really, really want to work for more purposeful driven companies, but they say, I can't find them. And I, of course, share the list that I have and everything, but I know it's not enough. What do you think needs to happen between now and where we can have more companies? There is still a big gap, like we talked today, like about the understanding of what really deep purpose is, the commitments of the leaders to make sure that it's not about them, but also about the new culture that they're creating. What do you think, or what do your students also say about, like, how do we fill that gap so that we have a lot more purpose-driven companies in the future?
look, I think you can't appeal to people's inner angels to become purpose driven. I think you have to recognize that for individuals, having purpose in life is good for health, mental and physical health. There's data to back it up. People with stronger sense of purpose are healthier, happier, and more productive, and all those good things. So do it because it's good for you. Similarly, for organizations, I think we need to help people understand that it's good for business. And when I say good for business, I mean good for shareholder value and other dimensions of value too. And I think once you understand that, then I think the argument becomes more compelling.
Yeah, yeah. And thanks for doing that, because you are helping a lot of people, especially with your background and where you are and where you're teaching. I know you're touching a lot of lives and you're putting a lot of inspiration out there. So we need more Ranjay Gulatis too, I think. So that's why I was so grateful to get to know you as well. So one more thing that I always think about, I want to hear what you have to say. Like, when I want to put a company into my purpose-driven list, I care about how they treat their people, employees. So even if some of the companies still to this day, I know, these examples too, if they give a big fat check to a nonprofit, they really even consider themselves purpose-driven, even if they didn't do any work on it, because they are giving to charity, which is something I love to see, but it's not ever enough. Because when I look at a company who calls themselves Purposeful, maybe even did the PR, the targets, or the marketing tagline, or did a little bit more work than that, but they still know they're either harming people or the planet. Would you consider them still to be purpose-driven or purposeful? Because they're still, like, I'm watching, and these big names out there, they're doing so much good in the world, it seems, but then when you hear about what they do to their people, or the pollution, or any harm that they do to the planet, I can't put them into my list. I just can't. What do you think?
So, Brooke, you can argue that people can be purposefully selfish, right?
Yes.
I am very intentional. I have a very clear idea. I have a clear sense of purpose. And it involves me and my shareholders or my bonus or whatever. So I thought I'd read you the definition of how purpose has been defined. Purpose, not by me, William Damon, a Stanford psychologist, said purpose is a stable and generalized intention to accomplish something that is at the same time meaningful to the self, and consequential for the world beyond the self. So the idea is that having a purpose forces you to elevate your thinking a little bit to transcend the self. Because if you're going to tap into your own higher calling, usually it encompasses something beyond the self for most of us, not all of us, most of us. So some of us will never get there. We will have, I would call, selfish purpose, for lack of a better phrase. So you can be selfishly purposeful, but I wouldn't call it purpose. I definitely wouldn't call it deep purpose. In my definition of deep purpose, purpose involves meaningful to the self. I'm not ignoring that, and consequential to the world beyond the self. It has goals and it has duties. It is long-term and it is short-term. So I think it's important to come to reconcile this. That's what I'm learning. And I think something for us to think about. And I think, so I wouldn't, they may say I'm very intentionally selfish. I would call it intention or selfish purpose, but I wouldn't call it purpose or deep purpose the way psychologists or organizational theorists like me defined it as.
So would you consider a company who's still knowingly is harming the planet, but they do have done a lot of work around purpose, but they are ignoring that? Would you call them a deep purpose company or not?
I think you can't compartmentalize purpose and say, I'm purpose here, but anti, or I'm, you know what I mean? And some companies try that. They try to create a foundation like a little, okay, I'll make up for all my evils by giving away a little to charity. Or I'll do good here. And I'm not saying you have to be doing good in everything you do. I mean, you look at, you look at a company like Pepsi, it still sells cola while it's trying to reduce salt, and they sell oatmeal. And so I'm not denying that companies may have, or you look at some of the oil and gas companies that have committed to going beyond petroleum, like BP and Shell, but they're still selling oil and gas right now. I grant them that. I think I'm no one to judge, by the way. This is just me, my personal.
Sure, of course.
Right? I grant them the idea that you're working your way, but I think there should be some kind of trajectory-minded thinking. that we are deeply intentional. If it's a stable equilibrium, like Marlboro or RGR, well, I'm going to be in the cigarette business forever, and I'm going to try to hide the fact that it's bad for you, and I'm going to dodge and duck, but I don't want to do anything else besides cigarette. Okay, I'll do e-cigarettes. So I'm so wedded to what I do, and that is harmful for people, and I don't have any other intention of doing anything else. I have a problem with that.
Yeah. I think it reminded me as you talked about the health, like CVS, as soon as they put their purpose in place with health in it, they decided not to sell tobacco, right? It was $2 billion a year. So that's my biggest litmus test. First of all, your product hopefully is not harming the people and planet, because the reason why I wanted to hear your opinion about that is because you talk to so many people and done a lot of research. And I think a lot of people are not adding the planet version, it's like part of it. When you put all the stakeholders in and you want to make sure that it's a win, even it's over time, not right now, like Unilever, for example, the example that you gave, they're doing it in time because you can't change everything, all the ingredients that you put into your products right away, but they have a really serious plan that they're working out. But when it's like a very big decision that you have to make and you are going to lose some money and leave some money on the table, that's the biggest litmus test, I think, to see if you're really serious about your purpose or not. So, yeah. And a lot of people are not adding the planet part, and planet is so important right now. That's why I think a lot of new generations are so much more into this and more purpose-driven companies, because they don't want any more harm to be done to the home that they're going to live in, right?
I couldn't agree with you more. So very well said.
Yeah. So I know we are running out of time, and I can ask you 10 different other questions. The last one I want to ask is since we both are coming from different parts of the world and living in the United States, do you feel like the country's culture has anything to do with having more purpose-driven companies being born or not? Do you see any tie between the country's culture and the company's cultures that happens to be there?
I don't have any data to back that up, but I will just tell you one thing is the pursuit of purpose is a universal global construct. Every ancient civilization in every corner of the world for thousands of years has contemplated purpose. There isn't one that didn't. Every one of them has contemplated purpose. I think, if anything, in this kind of modern day Western construct, and I wouldn't say even Western, is Eastern too, I mean, it's a global, this modern day corporate construct where suddenly we decided that businesses had a very narrow pursuit. I think some people attribute it to Milton Friedman. I think it predates Milton Friedman. This idea of what loosely people have called the Friedman doctrine, that businesses have a very narrow goal of serving, shareholders only, and at the expense of anything else. And I think that's a very narrow construal of even what Milton Friedman said. And I think is unfortunate, and it, is a narrow, myopic view of business too.
Yeah. And I think it came to the end of it. It's not sustainable. I think that's why we are here today talking with you, and a lot of more people understand that you can't keep people just for the money, and people get laid off in tons and tons, even if they did everything right. How is that going to stay sustainable? And the pandemic was surfaced a lot of problems we already have. That's how at least I see it, because people wanted this for a long time. And now we're at a place where we have to make those tough decisions for our organizations and for ourselves, I think. Yeah. Any parting thoughts for my audience before we leave you?
I think, Brooke, purpose unlocks such amazing opportunity for us individually and for organizations collectively. I think it's one of those hidden resources right under our nose. I myself can't believe that I waited so long to even think about it. But now that I have, I can't imagine how anybody would be living without it. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah,
So
I know. And thank you. Thank you for all you do. And I even wrote something what you posted yesterday at LinkedIn, I think, when you were asking, saying the same thing. I don't know how I waited this long. I'm so glad you waited this long because people listen to you more. Look at how much your book is getting so much attention because you got to that place where you have a bigger and wider audience, I think, and people have a lot of respect for people like you, and you're helping people like me who don't have a name out there or don't have the big titles, but dying to have this work done even more around the world. So your service to this world is amazing. So thanks for doing what you do, and thanks for talking to all these people and saying yes to me today as well. I'm sure my audience is so happy to listen to you, and
thank
thanks
you.
for being here with us. Yes.